Hi, everybody. This is Rebecca Thorne, back from a very long hiatus. And I'm sure most of you know I got COVID, which was fun. For me, I was lucky. It was really only like a bad cold, but it was still like a bad cold. So it knocked me out for most of November. I took these samples. I have a couple first pages and one query letter to read. So, well, one set of first pages and one query letter to read. And I'm super excited to be able to critique this stuff because I kind of want to get back in the swing of like writing because I was doing grad school this semester and will be again next semester. This is like my winter break area. So I'm trying to participate in a fake nano for December since I meant to do it in November and then that did not happen. So I'm trying to do nano, but I kind of need to like get back in the swing of like critiquing, reading first pages, kind of getting myself back in the swing of things. As I'm sure you can probably tell, I've got my new office set up. I've had a roommate up until about a week ago, which was sad. So she's gone back to Illinois. She bought a beautiful home, which is great. But I'm now alone in my house. So I'm hoping to do a little more of these YouTube videos to kind of fill the time and silence of my home. And I'm planning on bringing my dog in a little bit. I don't know. I don't think you can really see. Yeah. I don't think you're going to be able to see him. He's down there sleeping. But I like to bring him in at some point when he wakes up and kind of show him off because he's super cute and fluffy. It's Sammy. You all know him, but regardless, he's super cute and fluffy. And sometimes I put Christmas sweaters on him. So. Okay, so this set of pages, I don't actually know anything about them. I'm going in kind of blind. They were submitted by one of my friends, Evie, on my Discord server. If you don't know about my Discord server, we have about 200 authors there now of varying experience levels. We have everybody from like the people who are thinking they want to start a novel to professional and edited and published authors and agented authors. So that's kind of cool to have the whole spectrum. It's aimed at anybody who's interested in traditional publication. So if you're interested in traditional publication, you're looking for a really great thriving community of writers to talk to about that kind of thing. We host like weekly Zoom sessions. There's a channel for Word Wars with a bot who times you so that you can all like enter your word count in at the end and compete with each other. And then we have just a bunch of channels for like plotting, for media recommendations, for querying questions, all that jazz. So if you're interested in that kind of community, I've listed the link below. Feel free to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and let's get started. Okay, let's see. You know what? I've meant to share this. Hang on. Screen share. Yes, hang on. All right, one sec. Here we go. Okay. All right. Let's see. It started with a night on a hill. Oh, what a great first line. It wasn't any old night either. This one seemed to have waited for the sun to hit the ridge just right so he could canter up there with the sole purpose of looking gloriously splendid and dazzling. He sat there astride on a pale, sturdy horse, decked in pristine armor without a smudge of dust anywhere. Even the plume on his helmet was a spotless white. The sword hanging from his hip was, by virtue of its looks, very probably a magic sword. It had a dragon's head for a pommel and rubies for eyes. Its scabbard had a deep and dark shine. The whole and large of him painted a picture of being very rightly sent out by the king on a quest of great importance. I love the cap locks there. He was, by and large, the villagers would all later agree, the knightiest knight of any of them had ever come to see. The knight of great importance stood for a moment more, seemingly scanning the landscape. Most of the farmers had stopped by to take a look by the time he spurred the horse down the hill. One lonely, pesky cloud quite ruined the effect by dulling the shine of the armor, but that could not be helped. It would be a bit much to get back up there and do it over again, so the knight kept going. First, he rode through the village, a slight detour which none of the villagers seemed to mind. He smiled and he waved, and they threw blessings and flowers his way for the horse to crush under heavy hooves. The fields were next, laid out under that hill. He weaved a complicated pattern designed to ensure optimal visibility. Smile and wave, smile and wave. A squabble of children ran past as close as they dared. They shouted and brandished sword-like sticks at him and cried in delight when he added an extra nod of his head, just for them, the bright plume bobbing along. His arm had started to cramp by then, so he switched sides for a bit. The horse cantered across the stones, adding to the mantra in his head. Smile, wave, go, dragon. Win, return, collect, feast. There was no room in the canter for searching. Oh no, that part had already been taken care of. They had him memorize it, both plan and map, drilled him until he could repeat it blind, bit by shiny bit. If he closed his eyes now, he could see the roads crossing, the forest looming, starting, the cave looming. He hadn't understood all of it, hadn't dared to look too closely, but knowing did not have to be the same as understanding. Down in the field, a farmhand stretched up to watch him pass. An older farmer shot him a toothless grin, absent of teeth, filled with gratitude. Let them see the night pass by, off to slay the giant, or the dragon. Let them hope for better. Ride on, wave. He switched his hands again, heavy with the gauntlets. They'll only see the armor. Beneath, the sweat was drenching his tunic. Beneath, he was trembling. Smile. Oh, I love that. It hadn't been a very complicated map, even with the route weaving and doubling back longer than it ought to have been, until they could be sure every single subject had spotted the gleam of his new steel. Heroic and bright, heavy and hard, made special just for this. But he was almost there now, just a bit further. Just a bit more, and it would be too late to run. Whew. Underneath that unbidden thought, the horse snorted and slowed. It was a good horse, bred for battle, strong and sure-footed and fast. He could spur it to a gallop and be in the next town in a whirl and a blink. His thought process halted. So did the horse. He could, he thought, go in for the gallop. He'd never much ridden horses before, but he knew all about holding on. He could keep holding on right until sunrise, sell the horse, barter the armor, pick a direction, and never look back. He could be well gone before they noticed, well away from the beast's wrath. He thought of knightly tales, of being a hero, of satchels of gold. Damn himself, the gold most of all. He gently nudged the horse. It was a good horse, used to leading when its rider was drunk or dreaming or dead. It wasn't hard to keep the road to the plan. He tried not to think too much after that. It wasn't his job, thinking. Higher men had claimed that task, had been bred for it, raised for it. He was just to ride, or his was just to ride and meet and kill and return. And when I return, he thought, while dragging up a heavy arm to wave yet again at another worker in the field, I'll never pick up a sword again. I'll give it back and take my gold, ride away and find something else. A boring life, a pretty wife, far away and never again. The forest was blessedly cool after the long trek at high noon. Sweat cooled against his skin, and his trembles turned to shivers. Everyone knew about the cave. None were allowed to go near it, none dared, but they all knew about the gaping entry like a malformed mouth, about the dragon below, hungry and unyielding and undefeated. Before now, none had come this far and told the tale. He would be the first, the last, or so the story would go. It was different than he expected. He had pictured a looming monolith somehow, chains anchored deep into the stone, claw marks etched into every switch surface. At the very least, he had expected rust-stained grass and an odd forgotten bone. It was supposed to be a place of terror and spilled salt. The flowers weren't helping. Neither were the birds. He'd had help to get on the horse. Getting down was slightly easier, mostly because it was quite unavoidable to get there in the end. He ignored his painful knee, tied the horse to a tree, and was grateful to be alone. The gratitude fled at the mouth of the cave. Being alone was a deeply terrible thing. It meant there was nobody there to force him underground, nobody to remind him of the plan and the stakes and the gold. Yet down he had to go, down into the ground where the dragon slept. They had said it so surely, had promised it, and he hadn't dared to ask how they knew the damnable thing would be asleep. But sleep it surely must, for the cave was silent. There had been a map for this part, too. Had it had 7 corners or 6? He drew the sword before the 5th, just to make sure. What would a sleeping dragon sound like? Like an ebbing storm, rumbling low, like gasping bellows by a smith's fire? It was hard to read a cave when his own breathing would not stop echoing through the helmet. He took the 6th corner at a bit of a run. The torch they'd left him danced shadows across the wall. Nothing. He stilled his breath, stilled his heart, and dipped behind the bend. The dragon wasn't there. He was already having second thoughts about his second thoughts, and the armor was rattling around his bones, and damn himself and everything, the dragon wasn't there. The cave went on for a bit more. If it had been on the maps, he did not recall. It was a tunnel, dark and looming, and he did not want to take it. Wanted to return to the sunny air. There was something wrong with this air. Too thick, too damp, too sweet. He wanted to run, but a deal's a deal. Gold remained gold. So on he went, closer and closer, one foot after another, closer still. It was the very deepest bit of the cave. The only light here came from his torch, the only sound of the rush of blood in his ears, the crunch beneath his feet. He did not want to look down. He put an even bigger effort into not counting skulls. His own was pounding now, painfully loud. There was no dragon here either. Only bones, detritus, but broken and mauled, shunted off to the sides. In the middle of at the back, peculiar stones were glinting. They were great and jagged, gilded white under dancing light. It took him an embarrassingly long time to realize what he was looking at. He sagged in one great breath of immense relief. He didn't have to do it. He didn't. Great knights descend to save us all. He whirled, stricken with renewed fear. A woman was standing in his light, dressed in plain garb, torn something fierce across the hem, days away from her last bath. Just a woman. He lowered his sword. Were you going to kill it with that? She crossed her arms over her chest, what little of it she had. Scrawny, he thought. The only body she possessed was up in her hair, unruly and cut short. Skin tanned 2 shades away from pale. He felt almost personally affronted by all of it, although he couldn't rightly pinpoint why. Which one are you then? Foul-hearted knight? A house down on their luck, with too many sons? He opened his mouth ahead of having words. She had surprised him, and now the thought seemed thoroughly unimpressed. Not grateful, nor demure, nor even scared. His own bits took offense to that. She was looking him up and down, gauging the painted picture. Or just a lowly stable boy with perfect built. Anger flared. He didn't have to answer that. Low as he may be, there was still room beneath her for her to know her. Oh my gosh. Low as he may be, there was still room beneath her to know her place. Nothing? Not even a name? She offered him a mock bow. What sort of woman bowed? Mine is Palmyra. I'm so bad at fantasy names. I'm so sorry. Palmyra. I'm going to go with Palmyra. If it pleases you. Or not. I was supposed to die 4 days past, but you see, things didn't go as planned. It wasn't anything in the way she looked, he found, as much as it was the way she was looking. She'd be prettier if she smiled. He also found he had absolutely no idea what to do. The plan had never talked about a woman, not live ones. Still no name? No matter. Her eyes were harder than his armor. You listened for their story, you accepted their request, and here you are. And that's all I got. Okay, I love the humor in this. I mean, I'm sure you could tell that I was just delighted by like the little like moments there where, you know, like the from the king on a quest of great importance, and the fact that you like capitalized the quest of great importance is like such a nod to like the fantasy amusement, I guess. Just because like the knightiest knight any of them had ever come to see, you know. Just like those kind of like tongue-in-cheek comments when you're dealing with a fantasy, especially when it's like a knight going to kill the dragon. I kind of think those are almost necessary in this type of fantasy, just because everything else is so tropey, like the knight going to kill the dragon, you know. It's all very like common. And so adding those kind of like moments where you can tell that you know it's common and are kind of like laughing at how common it is. Like those I think are really great. I'm actually like, you know, the knight of great importance. I think that's awesome. I love that you start the story with this idea of him like standing there on the ridge so he could canter up at the exact moment of looking dazzling. But I will say that I don't really feel like his personality of what they're seeing, and I know that it's kind of tricky. I know that what they're seeing, like what the villagers are seeing, is this knight of great importance. You know, like you could imagine him standing on the hill in the sun shining just right behind him, and like his armor is gleaming, and the villagers are all like, "Oh my God, come to kill the dragon!" You know. But it doesn't really seem to go with what he is thinking about himself later on. You know, so like even over here, like you can tell that he's not very happy. Like he's happy to be a knight because he's going to get gold, but he's not very happy because of the knightliness of it, you know, like he doesn't really care about looking like a fantastic knight. So it's a little weird that he would go up here and do this in this moment when he actually is kind of thinking later about like running away, selling the horse, and leaving forever, you know. So I guess those two things kind of created like a bit of a dichotomy that I couldn't really solidify in my mind. Like his character is not quite as well formed as I think I would like it in the beginning. The big thing that I actually think you could probably work on here is the point of view. I don't know who the narrator is. And I think it's the knight, because we get to see some of these moments where he's thinking about it, you know, beneath he was trembling, smile. And so like, you know that the smile is his thought. So I would be inclined to say the knight is the point of view character. But you don't make it super obvious. And I think that this is something that you like people should remember when they're writing a first chapter, is that like you have one page sometimes to get people to understand who your main character is and what their purpose in life is. And one of the big things about that is making sure that they know who the narrator is. So if it's an omniscient point of view, which this could be, you're going to need to make sure that on this first page, you kind of show the villagers' points of view as well. Like you do in this first paragraph, like this is all clearly from like the villagers' points of view, and then you say they later would agree. But I guess I want to see more of this. Like maybe go into the minds of like the individual villagers who see him, and then move from there to the different characters, and then you can move into the knight's voice and give us that mentality. But if you're going to be doing it from the knight's point of view, we need to know his name, I think. The fact that we haven't really seen or heard his name here, again, just gives a little bit more of that distance. Like, it's pretty obvious to me by the end of this that the knight is not the main character. It's pretty obvious to me that this woman is going to be, and I think she's a dragon, which is awesome. And I love that twist where you're like, here's the typical knight going to slay the dragon, and then you're like, surprise, the dragon's actually a woman and she's going to kill him, you know? And I kind of think that that's interesting too, especially because she got a name and he didn't. But I don't know if this is the best way to introduce him, and I don't know if you need 5 pages before you get to Palermo, Palmyra. I don't know if you need 5 pages before you get to her before you do that. You know what I mean? I mean, I love what you've done, but I do think there was a lot of repetition in here. You know, like you have the halt, the horse stopping here, but then a couple pages up, you have him like inching through with his horse still. And then a little further down, you have him reaching the forest and then reaching the cave. And again, it's all very, like, I love, like, the flowers weren't helping, neither were the birds. I love the tongue-in-cheek kind of attitude for this fantasy, but I don't know if you need 3 pages to get to this point. And I don't know if omniscient is quite the point of view you're hoping to go for here. I think I would need to know more about what this story is, but this first chapter doesn't really tell me what the point of view is going to be, who the main character is going to be, why we should care about the main character as opposed to this knight. I almost wonder if it wouldn't be better if Palmyra is the main character, I almost wonder if it wouldn't be better to start with her chilling out in her cave and then go to the knight's perspective, because the knight is clearly such a minor character since he didn't even get a name or like any kind of real hopes or dreams. I mean, he did. He wants the gold, and he's scared about doing this. But Palmyra seems like a much more dynamic character to start this book with, and I'm not sure if starting with this like distant knight coming in is really going to set you apart from a lot of other fantasies that are out there. Like the tongue-in-cheek thing I really love, but I'm not sure if it's enough or unique enough. One of the other things that I think could possibly be exemplified here is the culture of this fantasy world. We're not really seeing like maybe when he's walking through on his horse, if you decide to keep this opening, we could possibly see something like he's walking past like a festival. Like maybe he meant to make this dramatic entrance, and then there's this festival happening that the villagers aren't even paying that much attention to him. Like maybe he's expecting, because he's like this stable hand turned knight, maybe he's expecting that he would be like turning heads left and right, and everybody's going to be so impressed with the knight, and then maybe he gets to this village and they are so used to seeing knights parading to the dragon's cave that they don't even care, like maybe they're having some kind of like spring planting festival and there's like dancing and music and like local cuisine, like really infusing that culture in there. And then when he starts to stroll through, he's like stepping on like trash from the festival, or like people are yelling at him to get his horse out of the square because they don't want his horse involved, like in interrupting the dancing or something like that. Like horses are pretty big and we don't know how wide these streets are, so something like that I think actually would work really well with this tongue-in-cheek kind of mentality for fantasy, because again, it's just taking that trope and twisting it just a little bit more, like now all of a sudden he's not the fancy knight who wants a beautiful wife in gold and the glory of slaying the dragon. Like now he's like this stable boy who like legit thinks that he's going to be getting that, and that's kind of the only reason he's there. And then you start to realize very quickly that like what he's built up in his head is not actually what reality is, you know? And I think that that's kind of cool. Like I think something like that would actually work a lot better to make this more engaging from the beginning. But again, I don't really know if it's necessary at all, just because it doesn't sound like he's the main character. It sounds like Palmyra is. So if that's the case, I would kind of refocus this chapter onto her. On a more like nitpicky level, and this is really more to do with like the writing style. Like your writing style is fantastic, but one of these things, like when you say like, you know, which one are you then? And then you have these different things, like this would need to be its own paragraph, because he didn't say this. And it's not immediately clear who is, because you haven't given us any dialogue tags with her statements. You know, like this is the first dialogue tag we get with her, and it's a little further down the page, you know. So just keep an eye on that. Like whenever you're having a dialogue section up here, you're going to want to make sure that the whatever dialogue tag follows it is the person who said that dialogue. Like you, and if it's not, you need to make a new paragraph for it, which you didn't do too often. That might have just been a mistake, but I'll mention it just in case it wasn't. There was one other thing I wanted to mention. Let me see, hang on. Yeah, so I think one of the things that you should definitely do is, especially with dialogue like this, where it's meant to be like very snappy and like every sentence she's saying kind of is imbued with meaning, because you can tell that this character is going to be a lot more powerful and important than this knight ever could be. So if that's the case, I almost think that like this kind of thing, like when you say, you know, foul-hearted knight, which one are you then? Foul-hearted knight, a house down on their luck with too many sons. Like that fragment doesn't make sense here. And this doesn't have any explanation because we haven't seen any houses up to this point. So if you want to include houses, you should maybe add like who runs the village that he walked through, you know, like which leader, like what house is that village a part of, and how does that matter in the government of this world, you know? This really comes into like the iceberg effect with plotting and world building, where you know you as the writer know everything, but like you only want to show this little tiny bit. So even just like a sentence that he sees, like the insignia of the houses, would imply to us during that walk through the village that there are houses. And then when she says this, it's not going to be so confusing because we have already seen evidence of that. The foul-hearted knight, that's kind of a bit of a turnaround from what she just said up here. The great knight descends to save us all. So like, why would she immediately turn around to like, you're a foul-hearted knight? She should be like, you know, a brave-hearted knight or something like that. But again, like just reading through those lines of dialogue and really thinking about what she's asking, I think will help add a lot of like oomph to this moment, because we can already tell that she's going to be important and weird. And I think that would kind of be useful. I'm also not sure if you need so much description about like her chest. It seems a bit contrite because you didn't really give a lot of description on like his package, you know, like I think that, you know, if you're going to be identifying those characteristics in a female, you need to identify those same characteristics in a male. And again, I'm not really sure if it's necessary at all. You know, like the size of her breast should have no play on what's happening in this story. Maybe if she's a trans character and you mention later that she binds her breast to feel more like a man, but then she's going with the female pronouns here anyway, so that's not really even that relevant. But anyway, those kind of things are things that I would think about. Like if you're going to be mentioning the boobs because your main character, like the knight maybe would notice the boobs, then you need to give us more of that hint of his personality earlier on. Like maybe when he's walking through the village, he notices the really beautiful women, and then we know to hate him because he's a sleazebag, because like that's all he's paying attention to is the beautiful women, you know. So thinking about those kind of descriptions from the point of view of the character that you're writing from is really, really important, especially in like a luscious world building fantasy like you're starting here. But otherwise, I mean, I really liked this. I think that there's a lot of, editing that you could be doing to it, but your writing style is fantastic. I was laughing out loud at a lot of the stuff that you wrote. The tongue-in-cheek humor is very much my alley. And I think that that's great. Be aware that if you're going to be doing omniscient, third person omniscient is actually really, really hard. And the people who think that it's not, and I don't think this is you, but the people who think that it's not hard are usually not doing it right. There's a reason that most early fan fiction ends up being third person omniscient, because people, like brand new writers, think that it's really easy. But to do it right and to really like head hop in that way, in a way that adds to the story without making it confusing as hell, that's kind of tricky. So for this type of story, I almost would recommend you start with Palmyra and maybe even nix the night entirely, unless you wanted to do like a little prologue from his point of view. And if you do it that way, make sure that it's exclusively from his point of view, unless you're planning on doing omniscient, like legit through the rest of it. So I see somebody over here who's joined in. I'm not sure if that's one of the people from my server or, anyway. I Love Gaming, did you have something to say about this, or? I think there might be a bit of a delay, but anyway, that was just kind of my thought on this. I really loved the fantasy twist. I love the knights and like the way that it's twisted. This kind of reminds me about Dealing with Dragons. Okay. This kind of reminds me about Dealing with Dragons, where it's about that princess who decides she doesn't want to marry the knight, and so she's going around her courtyard kissing frogs because she's hoping one of them will turn into a beautiful prince that she can marry instead. And then she decides that one of the perfectly respectable things to do is to become a dragon's princess. So she runs off to the dragons and asks them to take her in as a captive, basically, because that is a perfectly respectable thing to do. I highly recommend reading even just the first chapter of that book. It's by Patricia C. Reed, W-R-E-D-E. I highly recommend doing that, just because I think that that type of writing style is very, very similar to this writing style, with that like ironic kind of tongue-in-cheek, twisting the fantasy tropes type mentality. And she did that really, really well. So highly recommend checking out that book. I think the first chapter even could give you a really good perspective on how to approach this book. But great job. I mean, Evie, this is really, really good. I really love your writing style. I think this is the first exposure I've had with it. And it's fantastic. So nicely done. And I will go ahead and let you all go for now. I'm going to be doing a query critique a little later, either today or sometime this week, because I have that query critique to do as well. But I'm waiting to see if that's the most recent version, since it took me 2 weeks from getting that query letter to decide that I have the time to critique it. So anyway, sorry for that delay. Thank you guys so much for giving me the chance to read your stuff. And if you guys all want to join my Discord server, the link is down below. And it is open to any writer who is seeking traditional publication, 18 plus. If we find out that you're underage, we will boot you. So anyway, feel free to hit the bell icon, the subscribe button, and I hope that you guys can tune in next time. Thanks so much. Bye.